Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Shivanshu Shukla and you are watching Let's Rock. If you are interested in this channel, make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so that you never miss an update. In previous video, we have discussed first 30 questions of BHUPT 2010 exam. Today we will solve next 30 questions. Okay, so let's start. First question says, amount of dip is maximum. Now, amount of dip of a plane is its maximum angle from the horizontal, that is true dip. Okay, so this question is basically asking that for a plane amount of dip is maximum at which direction. So this is taking reference of strike direction. For example, first option is in the direction of strike, second is at 90 degree to the strike direction, third is at 45 degree to the strike direction, and fourth one is at 0 degree to the strike direction. Okay, so basically this question is taking reference of strike direction, along which we have to tell amount of dip is maximum at which angle. Okay, so what is amount of dip? Amount of dip of a plane is its maximum angle from the horizontal, and it is known as true dip. And true dip is measured. True dip is always measured perpendicular to the strike direction. And the direction in which true dip is measured is known as true dip direction, and that is it is 90 degree to the strike direction. So the amount of dip is maximum at 90 degree to the strike direction. So the correct answer is at 90 degree to the strike direction. The dip measured other than perpendicular to the strike direction is known as apparent dip, and it is never more than true dip. Okay, so at 45 degree to the strike direction, the dip is apparent dip. Okay, in the direction of a strike, that is if amount of dip is parallel to the strike direction, then it is 0 or minimum. Same in this case at 0 degree to the strike direction, when dip is measured parallel to the strike direction, then dip is also 0, that is minimum. Okay, so amount of dip is maximum at 90 degree to the strike direction. So the correct answer is option 2. Next question is, in a recumbent fold, the axial plane is nearly. So basically this is asking about dip of axial plane. If in a recumbent fold, if axial plane is horizontal or vertical or inclined at 45 degree or inclined at 30 degree. So in recumbent fold, dip of axial plane is 0 degree to 10 degree. That is nearly horizontal. So the correct answer is horizontal. If in case axial plane is vertical, then the fold term is known as upright fold, and in case if it is inclined at 30 degree to 60 degree angle, then it is known as moderately inclined fold. So in this question, in a recumbent fold, the axial plane is horizontal. If this question were asking in a upright fold, then in case of upright fold, the axial plane is vertical, and in case of moderately inclined fold, the axial plane is inclined at 30 degree to 60 degree. Okay, so here the correct answer is horizontal. Next question is, the average density of the earth is. This question is data based question, and the average density of earth is 5.5 gram per centimeter cube, or you can say 5500 kilogram per meter cube. Okay, so 5.5 gram per centimeter cube, or you can say 5500 kilogram per meter cube. And density of earth, that is 5.5 gram per centimeter cube, is maximum among all other planets. Okay, and it is after earth, the density of density of Mercury is 5.4, then Venus 5.2, Mars 3.9, Neptune 1.7, Jupiter 1.3, Uranus 1.2, and Saturn 0.7 gram per centimeter cube. So this is the order of descending order. This is the descending order of density of planets, in which density of Saturn is the least, that is 0.7 gram per centimeter cube. Okay, so the average density of Earth is 5.5 gram per centimeter cube. 5.5 gram per centimeter cube. This is the correct answer. Next question is, volcanic activity is usually absent along. So number 1 is divergent plate boundary, number 2 is convergent plate boundary, number 3 is transform fault, and number 4 is all of the above. So what is divergent plate boundary? Divergent plate boundary are those in which plate moves away from each other. Okay, and if plate moves away from each other, there is a formation of new crust. Volcanism takes place and there is formation of new crust. So these divergent plate boundaries are also known as constructive plate boundary. Okay, and mostly sealed volcanoes occur in divergent plate boundary. Number second is convergent plate boundary. So in convergent plate boundary, plate moves towards each other, in which one plate which is subducted is destroyed. Okay, so in this case, in divergent plate boundary, plates are constructed so that new crust is constructed, so that these are known as constructive plate boundary, and in convergent plate boundary, plate crust is destroyed, so that these are known as destructive plate boundary. In case of transform fault, plate slide past each other without the formation of new crust. Okay, in transform fault, neither the crust is created nor the crust is destroyed. Though earthquake is often present in transform fault boundaries, but volcanic activity is usually absent. So the correct answer is transform fault. Next question is, a strike line with a given value is called. So basically this is asking about definition. If you know the definition of all these terms, that is horizontal equivalent, contour interval, contour line and stratum contour, you can easily answer this question. So first let's go with contour line. So what are contour line? Contour lines are the line joining points of equal height above the mean sea level as well as points of equal depth below the mean sea level. Okay, and these two are contour interval and horizontal equivalent are the factors of contour line, in which horizontal equivalent is the horizontal distance between two adjacent contours and contour interval is the vertical distance, constant vertical distance between two consecutive contours. So basically these two are associated with contour line. So this is not the definition of these three, first, second and fourth. In case of stratum contour are the strike lines on a bed at different regular elevation. Okay, so yeah, stratum contour is the correct answer, which are the strike line with a given value. Okay, so the correct answer is stratum contour. Let's go with another other question. Next question is, columnar joints are seen in. So what are joints? Joints are a brittle fracture surfaces in a rock along which there is little or no displacement occurred. Okay, what are joints? Joints are a fracture surface in rocks along which little or no displacement has occurred. So basically these are columnar joints are a type of joint. These are formed in basalts, and these are also known as cooling joints. Okay, in sandstone there is possibility of bedding joints. Okay, I don't know in gneissic rocks and pegmatites. I think in gneissic rocks there are formation of irregular joints, and please comment down below which type of joints are found in pegmatite rock. In case of granite, I am telling you, in case of granite, exfoliation joints or seed joints are common, and also mural joints are also common in case of granite. Okay, but columnar joints are seen in basalt, and columnar joints are also known as cooling joints. Okay, next question is, Bowdens are formed in. Now this question is asking, Bowdens are formed in which regime? Extensional regime, compressional regime, zero stress regime or fault regime. Okay, so what are Bowdens? Bowdens are a tabular shaped detached fragment of pre-existing body layer, or you can say pre-existing rigid body layer. Okay, so basically there was a rigid body layer, or you can say a bed which was rigid earlier. Then in this bed extensional force applied. Now this is converted into detached block, tabular detached block. Now these detached blocks are known as Bowden. So basically in formation of Bowden, which force is applied? Tensional force, or you can say extension is applied. So Bowdens are formed in extensional regime. So the correct answer is extensional regime. In compressional regime, the feature which is formed is known as fold. Okay, in case of fold, there was say a bed, a rigid body layer. Okay, and in rigid body layer force is applied, compression force is applied. Now this bed will either this bed will bend like this, or this will if it is brittle then it will break. Okay, so if it bent like this, then it is termed as fold. Okay, Next question is, pitch is another term for. So what is pitch? First of all, what is pitch? Pitch is the angle between lineation and strike of the plane. Okay, so basically pitch is the angle between lineation and strike of the plane, and it is measured in the plane containing lineation. And another term which is used for pitch is rake. Rake is used for pitch. Now what is head? Head is a complementary angle of dip. That is, if say dip is 60 degree, then head will be 90 minus 60, that is 30 degree. This is complementary angle of dip. Okay, what is plunge? Plunge is the angle of lineation with respect to horizontal datum, and the thing is, this is measured in a vertical plane, while pitch is measured in the same plane in which there is lineation present. And in case of plunge is measured in vertical plane, and it is the angle of lineation with respect to horizontal datum. What is axial angle? Axial angle is the trend of hinge line. Okay, so yeah, pitch is another term for rake. Correct answer is rake. Next question is, again, an imaginary line which join points of equal elevation. Again, this is asking definition. Okay, so imaginary line which join points of equal elevation is known as contour line, as I told you earlier in question number 35 or 34 maybe. Okay, so in imaginary line which join points of equal elevation is known as contour line. Now let's see other points also. Isothermal line. Isothermal line are the line joining points of equal temperature. Isoseismal line are the line joining places with equal seismic intensity, and isograde are the line joining plane of constant metamorphic grade. Okay, so here an imaginary line which join points of equal elevation is known as contour line. Correct answer is contour line. Next question is, folds with interlimb angle greater than 70 degree are called. Now what is interlimb angle? Interlimb angle is the angle between two adjacent limbs of a fold. Now this classification is known as Flutie classification, and it is based on interlimb angle. So basically Flutie divides folds on the basis of interlimb angle. So if interlimb angle is between 0 degree, then it is known as isoclinal fold. If it is between 0 degree to 30 degree, then it is known as tight fold. If it is between 30 degree to 70 degree, then it is known as closed fold. If interlimb angle is between 70 degree to 120 degree, then it is termed as open fold. And if it is greater than 120 degree and between 180 degree, then it is termed as gentle fold. Now this question is asking interlimb angle greater than 70 degree. So in case of open fold, interlimb angle is between 70 degree and 120 degree, that is interlimb angle is greater than 70 degree. So the correct answer is open fold. In case of closed fold, interlimb angle is between 30 degree to 70 degree. Okay, in case of tight fold, it may be 10 degree to 30 degree. Sometimes it may be also 0 degree to 30 degree, because in place of isoclinal fold, interlimb angle may vary between 0 degree to 10 degree. That's why tight fold may be between 10 degree to 30 degree. So here the correct answer is open fold, in which interlimb angle is greater than 70 degree, or you can say between 70 degree and 120 degree. Now next question is, gauge is associated with. Now gauge is a feature which indicate faulting. Okay, along with gauge, myelonites, breccia, cataclysite, schlickensites are exclusive proof of faulting. Okay, so basically gauge is what? Gauge is indication of faulting. If you get gauge in a field, then you can say there is presence of fault, but this is not the sufficient condition. Okay, you should have other physiographic criteria and other field criteria also to determine fault. By the way, joints, you can say, yeah, fold. Recognition of fold is done by direct observation in field where these are continuously exposed. For example, dome you can easily determine that this is dome by going through field. Okay. For unconformities, there is presence of conglomerate at bottom, presence of paleosol also, and abrupt changes in grade of metamorphism also indicate the presence of unconformity. Okay, and presence of joint divides the rock into number of parts or block. So you can easily determine the presence of joint by seeing that there is a fracture. Okay, I told you that joint is a fracture along which there is little or no displacement takes place. Okay, so by the way, gauge is associated with fault, so correct answer is fault. Next question is, folds having parallel limbs are. Now, since I told you, according to Frutti classification, Frutti classified folds on the basis of interlimb angle, and interlimb angle is the angle between two limbs. Okay, so say if there are parallel limbs, then their angle may be 0 degree to 10 degree. Okay, and this is the case for isoclinal fold. In isoclinal fold, interlimb angle is between 0 degree to 10 degree. You can say folds having parallel limbs. So the correct answer is isoclinal fold. Now, parallel fold, this name, this term might be confusing with this question. Folds having parallel limbs, you can easily tick this. But parallel folds are also known as 1B fold, and this parallel fold and similar fold, these both are the Ramsey classification of fold, belongs to Ramsey classification of fold, in which Ramsey classify fold on the basis of deep isogon. So in parallel folds are also known as 1B fold, and in this case fold with layer of constant thickness. Okay, parallel folds are the fold with layer of constant thickness. While in case of similar fold, these are known as class 2 fold, and in similar fold these are the fold with deep isogon parallel to axial planes. Okay, so these both are belongs to Ramsey classification of fold, in which Ramsey divide fold on the basis of deep isogon. And please comment down below if you know something about this fold, infinite fold. So the correct answer of this question is fold having parallel limbs is isoclinal fold. Let's come to next question. The term caldera is associated with. To answer this question, you should know what is caldera. Caldera are large scale collapse features in which diameter is greater than 1 kilometer, which are typically formed at central belt fairly late in the eruptive episode. Or you can say these are a large depression formed when a volcano erupts and collapses. So from the definition itself, it is clear that caldera is associated with volcano. Okay, not associated with river, not associated with glacier, and neither associated with wind. So caldera are associated with volcano. These are collapse feature. Remember this thing. Next question is, which of the following, a V-shaped valley is characteristic of. Now, what are V-shaped valley? V-shaped valley are the valleys erosional landform of river. Okay, and these are formed by rapid cutting and deepening in the youth stage of river erosion. So it is clear from the definition that V-shaped valley is characteristic of river. Okay, and these are formed in youth stage of river. In case of glacier, there are two valleys, U-shaped valleys and hanging valley. Okay, but in case of ocean and lake, there is no such valley formation. So V-shaped valley is characteristic of river, and in case of glacier, there are U-shaped and hanging valleys. In case of karst landforms, there are two valleys, Blind Valley and Pocket Valley. There may be other valleys also, but most significant are Blind Valley and Pocket Valley. Please name some of the valleys which you know in karst landform, or other valleys if you know. Please comment down below. Okay, so coming back to next question, which of the following is not a glacial feature? So to answer this question, we should know about all these features, that these features are associated with which which agent. Now, yardang are what? Yardang are sharp sinus ridges formed by wind erosion. So from itself, you can say that yardang are not a glacial feature, because these are aeolian feature, as they are formed by wind erosion. Now let's see other option also. You got your answer, yardang, but let's see other option also. Buxrund. These are a deep crack, or you can say crevasses, near or at the top of glacier, separating moving ice from the ice that is not moving. Okay, and these are formed by glacial erosion. Okay, so these are glacial landforms, and these are a type of crevasses. Now arete are also arete and crevasse. These also are formed by glacial erosion. Now arete are a sharp crested knife edge ridge between two shocks, while crevasse are a deep crack found in ice sheet simply. And Buxrund, I told you that these are a type of crevasse. which are separating moving ice from ice that is not moving. Okay, so let's go to next question. Next question is, seeps are found in which environment? So what are seeps? Seeps are a long narrow sand dunes parallel to the prevailing wind direction. Now if these are sand dunes and there is action of wind, so these are formed in desert environment. It clearly shows that these are formed in desert environment, because you will not get sand in a glacier environment, you will not get wind in pluvial environment, and you can also not get wind and sand together in lacustrine environment. So these three environment are not for seep, formation of seeps. So seeps are basically found in desert environment. Okay, and next question is, rejuvenation in an area is suggested by which of the following? Now what is rejuvenation? Rejuvenation is just a coming back of old stage of river to its youth stage again. Now how it is possible? Say if a river is in its old stage. Okay, now this river is affected by earth movements. Okay, say a tectonic upliftment or volcanism or earthquake, anything. Now instead of carrying on its depositional work, it starts eroding vigorously. Why? Because its course is uplifted now. So now it acquire many diagnostic feature of youth stage of a stream. Now this is known as rejuvenation, and the features which indicate rejuvenation are uplifted peneplain, neck points, paired river terraces, spurs and benches, and incised meanders. Okay, so in all of these only one option is correct, that is paired river terraces, which indicate rejuvenation. Now waterfalls are present in youth stage of river, but it is not the rejuvenation landform. And V-shaped valley are also present in youth stage of river, but it is not a rejuvenated landform. Because in case of rejuvenation, first river goes through old stage, then after upliftment or after something tectonic activity, it came back to its youth stage. So waterfalls and V-shaped valley are indicative of youth stage of river, but not rejuvenation landform. Now paired river terraces is your correct answer. Coming back to next question. Thermohaline circulation results due to difference in. Now from the name itself, thermohaline, thermo means temperature and haline means salinity, and these temperature and salinity, these both factors together determine the density of the sea. So basically in thermohaline itself, three terms are associated, which are temperature, salinity and density. So thermohaline circulation results due to difference in density, temperature and salinity. So the correct answer is your all of the above. Next question is, which of the following marks the farthest advance of a glacier? So if you see in option, there is terminal moraine, lateral moraine, medial moraine and ground moraine. So basically all these four are type of moraine. Now what is moraine? Moraine is nothing, it's a glacial debris which is transported and deposited by glacier or ice sheet. Now glacial debris consist of material which are heterogeneous in shape and size, and it includes angular blocks of rock boulders, pebbles and clay. Okay, now in terminal moraine, as the name concerned, terminal means end moraine. This is also termed as end moraine, and these are formed at the end of a glacier. You can say if glacial debris is deposited by glacier to the end of glacier. Okay, and in this case the front of glacier remains stationary for a long time. Okay, so basically terminal moraine are also known as end moraine. Now let's see other option also. Lateral moraine, if glacial debris is deposited in the margin, okay, in the margin of glacier or ice sheet, then it is known as lateral moraine. In medial moraine, if glacial debris is deposited in the middle of the glacier, then these are termed as medial moraine. And ground moraine are formed because of the excessive load carried by a glacier. It is deposited on its own bed or at the base. So basically only terminal moraine is the moraine which marks the farthest advance of a glacier, as it is also known as end moraine. So the correct answer is your tunnel moraine. Next question is, which of the following is a type of volcanic eruption? So to answer this question, you should know all these options. So first one is Caledonian. Caledonian is a type of orogeny. Okay, it is a mountain building process which affected the Caledonian geosyncline. Okay, so Caledonian is a orogeny and it occurs between late Cambrian to middle Devonian period. Strombolian is a type of volcanic eruption you can say, and these are less violent volcanic eruption. So the question is asking for this, which one of the following is a type of volcanic eruption? So the correct answer is your Strombolian. These Venetian and Bombolian, I have never heard about these words. I think these are just examiners fancy words. So I don't know if you know about these words. Please comment down below about Venetian and Bombolian. So the correct answer is Strombolian. Okay, so next question is, ventifacts are found in. Now what are ventifacts? Ventifacts are pebble or boulder shaped by the wind. Okay, now you can say these are formed by wind erosion again, and these are basically of three types: in-canter, Dwi-canter and re-canter. In-canter, as the name suggests, in means one, that is these are one phase or one sided ventifacts. Dwi-canter, Dwi means two, that is these are two sided ventifacts, and re-canter, re means three, that is these are three sided ventifacts. Okay, now basically these are pebble or boulder and there is action of wind. So in deep ocean this can't be formed. In glacier also this can't be formed. In volcanic eruption, do you think so? In volcanic eruption is responsible for ventifacts by its definition? No. These are also because there is need of pebble or boulder you will get in volcanic eruption. Okay, but where you will get wind, and if these wind are constantly bombard pebbles and stone in the desert with sand and dust, sculpting them into angular fragments. So basically these are these are features which are formed by wind in desert environment. So the correct answer is desert. Next question is, a lagoonal circular coral reef is called. Now there are two words in this question also, in this question itself. One is lagoon and other is coral reef. What are coral reef? Coral reef are ridges which are formed by secretion of calcium carbonate by corals. Now what is lagoon? Lagoon is a shallow body of water which is separated from larger body of water. Okay, so now this is asking about type of coral reef. The coral reef are basically of three type, and these are, number one is fringing reef, second is barrier reef, and third is atoll, and these three of them mark the successive growth of coral reef. Okay, fringing reef, barrier reef and atoll, these are the sequence of successive growth of coral reef around a sinking or rising island. We will describe it in descriptive videos. So first of all, let's go through options. Number one is Blue Lagoon. Now what is Blue Lagoon? Blue Lagoon is nothing. It is an artificial geothermal spa near Swatsangi geothermal power plant in Iceland. It's not island, it's Iceland. Sorry, it's Iceland, near Iceland. Okay, so Blue Lagoon is an artificial geothermal spa near Swatsangi geothermal power plant, and it is the result of the water output from Swatsangi geothermal power plant itself. Now second one is atoll. I told you atoll is a type of coral reef, and it is the last stage of growth of coral reef, and this is a circular or shoe shaped ridge encircling central lagoon. So basically this defines the question. Okay, this is the definition, this is the term which is associated with this question. A lagoonal circular coral reef is also called as atoll. Now let's see other option also. Barrier type coral reef. Now as the name suggests, it's a barrier. Now barrier among what? Barrier among lagoon and sea. Basically what happen is, say if a island is if island or volcano is subducting or subsiding, then coral reefs are forming. The coral reefs grow and encircling a central lagoon. Okay, now this central lagoon is now the reef is acting as a barrier between the circular lagoon and ocean. So these are known as barrier type coral reef. What are marginal reef? Marginal reef develop directly from a shore, especially surround some island. Okay, so basically marginal reef are the first in stage of successive growth of coral reef, then barrier type coral reef, then atoll. If this question is concerned, along a lagoonal circular coral reef is called, then it is atoll. So correct answer is atoll. Next question is, what can be expected at a depth of 35 km inside the earth? Now again this is a database question and it is from interior of the earth. If you know the depth of all these four, then you can easily answer this question, because inner mantle, depth of inner mantle, you can say you can get inner mantle at a depth of 670 km to 2900 km. Inner core, in case of inner core is between 5300 km to 6370 km. Now Mohorovich's discontinuity. Mohorovich's discontinuity is discontinuity between crust and mantle, and it is between 20 to 90 km. On an average you can say it's 35 km. This is 20 to 90 km because the thickness of crust is variable and it is between 20 to 90 km. Okay. So therefore you can get Mohorovich's discontinuity between 20 to 90 km, but on an average you can say you can get Mohorovich's discontinuity at 35 km depth. So basically this is the question asking about what can be expected at the depth of 35 km inside the earth. So the correct answer is Mohorovich's discontinuity. What is Gutenberg discontinuity? The Gutenberg discontinuity is discontinuity between, or you can say it is a layer between mantle and core. Okay, and it is a depth and it is at the depth of 2900 km. So these three options are totally incorrect because these are at a greater depth. The correct answer is Mohorovich's discontinuity. Next question is, the Richter scale measures. What does Richter scale measure? So Richter scale is a logarithmic scale and it measures the magnitude of earthquake. Okay, and what is magnitude of earthquake? Magnitude of earthquake is the amount of ground shaking. Basically, Richter scale is a old-fashioned concept. Now it is only used in news channels. Scientists use MMS. MMS is what? MMS is moment magnitude scale. Okay, so now scientists are using moment magnitude scale. Why? There are some reasons. Richter scale was used between 1935 to 1970. Okay, and it was replaced by moment magnitude scale. Why? Because Richter scale worked largely for those occurring with earthquake occurring within about 370 miles of seismometers, while moment magnitude scale records all the seismic waves from an earthquake to seismograph across the world. Okay, so now moment magnitude scales are used, but Richter scale also used to measure the magnitude of earthquake, and it is the data which we get in news channels and all those. Now distance of location of earthquake. Distance of location of earthquake is measured by observing lag time between arrivals of PA and SP. Intensity of earthquake is measured by there are different scale, but the scale which is used most often is modified Mercalli scale. This is a 12 in modified Mercalli scale there are 12 measures of intensity of earthquake according to severity of damage. And depth of epicenter of earthquake, it is a computational work and it is a a very complex process to find the depth of epicenter of earthquake. So the Richter scale measures the magnitude of earthquake. The correct answer is magnitude of earthquake. Now next question is, tsunami is a. So you should know tsunami is a Japanese word for harbor wave. Okay, now these are also mistakenly known as tidal waves, but these have nothing to do with tide, because tide is not responsible for origin of tsunami. So tsunami are basically what? Tsunami are seismic sea waves. Okay, seismic sea waves which are generated by you can say volcanic eruption, underwater volcanic eruption, or earthquake, severe earthquake, or landslide etc. These are the reason due to which tsunamis occur. Okay. Now typhoon is a type of storm, and it is a tropical cyclone in North Pacific Ocean, which occur in you can say eastern part of North Pacific Ocean, or no, sorry, western part of North Pacific Ocean. Cyclone is also a storm which is occur in Indian Ocean. Okay, so these two are storm. Only tsunami is a seismic sea waves. Okay. Now next question is, the term piracy is associated with which of the following? So first you should know what is the term piracy. Term piracy is nothing. Term piracy is river disappearance or river capture. One river is captured by another stream by headward erosion. For example, you can say Saraswati river. Saraswati river is captured by Yamuna river, and this is because of the upliftment of Aravalli ranges. Okay, you can say disappearance of river Saraswati is consequence of upliftment of Aravalli ranges. Okay. So clearly from definition, the term piracy is associated with river. Now next question is, sediment transport in which particles moved forward in a series of short leaps and bounces is called. Basically this is a question from sediment transport. In sediment are transported either in case of wind or water. So basically these options are traction, suspension, saltation. These sediment transport may be occur in maybe in air or maybe in water. Say for example, say what is traction? Traction in which particles moving without losing contact with the bed. Okay, in which particles are moving without losing contact with the bed, that is known as traction, or you can say rolling. Okay, and it includes rolling of large and elongated grains, sliding of grains over past each other, or creep, you can say creep. Okay, now suspension, what is suspension? In which finer particles carried higher up above the bed, that is known as suspension. Saltation, in case of saltation, it is a type of bed load transport in which particles move forward in a series of short leaps and bounces, and this is the question asking about. So saltation is the correct answer, and traction and saltation are type of bed load transport, while suspension is a type of suspended load transport. Okay. Now next question is, the number of crystallographic axes in uniaxial Mendel is. Now Mendels which crystallizes in tetragonal crystal system and hexagonal crystal system are uniaxial in nature. Now in case of tetragonal crystal system, there are 3 crystallographic axes which are mutually perpendicular to each other, while in case of hexagonal system there are 4 crystallographic axes, out of which 3 are at 120 degree to each other, and the 4th one is vertical axis which is perpendicular to all these 3. So basically in case of uniaxial Mendel, there may be 3 crystallographic axes or 4 crystallographic axes. So the correct answer is 3 or 4. While in case of uniaxial Mendel, there is only one optic axis. If this question were asking about optic axis, then the correct answer would be 1, because there is only one optic axis, as the name says, uniaxial. Uni means one and axial means axis, optic axis. So only one optic axis, that is termed as uniaxial. In case of biaxial, Mendels which crystallizes in orthorhombic, monoclinic and triclinic crystal system are biaxial in nature. Okay, and these biaxial Mendels have 2 optic axes, as the name concept biaxial. Bi means 2 and axial means 2. So basically 2 optic axes. So as far as this question is concerned, the number of crystallographic axes in uniaxial Mendel is 3 or 4. Next question is, 2V is the angle between. So what is 2V angle? 2V angle is also known as optic angle, and it is the acute angle between 2 optic axes. It is a biaxial in case 2V is measured only in case of biaxial Mendel, because only in case of biaxial Mendel there are 2 optic axes. And by definition 2V angle is the angle between 2 optic axes. So clearly this can only measured in biaxial Mendel. Okay, So now the correct answer of this question, 2V is the angle between, the correct answer is biaxial optic axis. Okay, because in biaxial Mindel there are two optic axes and 2V is the angle between them. Now the angle between A and C crystallographic axis, in previous video I told you the angle between A and C crystallographic axis is beta angle, the angle between B and C crystallographic axis is alpha angle, and angle between A and B crystallographic axis is gamma angle. The angle between fastest and slowest direction is always 90 degree. Fastest and slowest direction are always perpendicular to each other. So yeah, the correct answer is biaxial optic axis. A Mindel X is invisible in Canada balsam. The refractive index of X is. So to answer this question, you should know the refractive index of Canada balsam and some concept also, which I will tell you. So first of all, refractive index of Canada balsam is 1.54. Okay. Now, concept number 1 is, if refractive index of Canada balsam, or you can say any other mounting medium, and Mindel boundary are the same, then the light is not refracted at Canada balsam and Mindel boundary, and Mindel does not appear, or it is invisible. So if a Mindel is invisible in Canada balsam, then the refractive index of Mindel and Canada balsam is same, and you know refractive index of Canada balsam is 1.54. so the refractive index of Mindel X will be 1.54 also. Now if in case the refractive index of Mindel X is other than Canada balsam or mounting medium, then what happen? Then the Mindel will stand out, or you can say a Mindel's boundary is visible only when there is difference between refractive index of Mindel and Canada balsam or any other mounting medium, and this is also known as relief. Relief is the what? Relief is the degree to which Mindel grain stand out from the mounting medium. Now, higher the difference between refractive index of Mindel grains, higher the relief of Mindel grain. Okay, and it is basically of three type: high relief, moderate relief, and low relief. In case of high relief, the difference between refractive index of Mindel and mounting medium is greater than 0.12. In case of moderate relief, the difference is between 0.04 to 0.12, and in case of low relief, the difference is less than 0.04. Okay, so yeah, we will discuss about relief in next video. Basically, as far as this question is concerned, the refractive index of Mindel X will be 1.54. Correct answer is 1.54. Okay, so if you are watching this video till now, so thank you very much, and please like if you like the video. Please press the like button, and please subscribe if you have not done yet, so that you never miss an update. See you guys in the next lecture. Thank you.